here's Brody Brazil.
This video is going to have a lot of different things going on because, yes, I am going to give you 6 potential NHL expansion cities, but before I get to any of that, I'm also going to downplay even the thought or premise or idea of the National Hockey League expanding beyond its current 32 teams. Like, they worked so hard and they got things so right just to get to 32. Why mess with a good thing? And that's where I begin my general thoughts. 32 is optimal. You have 4 different divisions, 8, 8, 8, and 8 in terms of teams. You've got 2 conferences. There's 16 teams each. You have 16 teams make the playoffs. It's also very symmetrical, and it works out in a lot of different ways. And so if we're talking expansion here, unless you have 2 or 3 or 4 cities ready to go at once, what's the plan here? If you go from 32 to 33 in a single year, well, then that tells me that there is an ultimate plan in place to eventually jump from 32 to 36. What I'm saying here is 33 and 34 and 35 are not end game numbers. Now you're caught in between again. You've got that imbalance, you've got scheduling issues, you've got playoff issues. It just works so much better if you have all even numbers. You also have the situations in Winnipeg and Arizona, one more maybe seemingly severe than the other, with the whole Glendale to Scottsdale to Mesa to Phoenix, and where the Arizona Coyotes are playing in Tempe right now on the campus of Arizona State. So that still is yet to be determined. I'm rooting for the best. I'm rooting for them to stay. I hope that's what happens. You also had Winnipeg come out and say within the last month or so that their business is not doing so well. Their tickets are down. Their season tickets are down. And unless they're at like 99% capacity, that their business is not doing so hot. So you've got those 2 things going on. Does expansion seem super prudent, like with those 2 things also going on in the background? There's also the thought that the NHL might become too diluted if you add another 1, 2, 3, or 4 teams. I mean, if we're talking 4 more teams, let's call it 100 more NHL players than there are today, 25 per team, let's just say. Is the NHL different? Like, is there a reason right now those 100 players are in the American Hockey League, or they're playing in some European league, or in the KHL, or wherever they're playing? Does it change the product fundamentally? I think to a very small degree it does, but let's just say that it does. You can't say it doesn't. I think our conversation, maybe our argument here, is that it does dilute the NHL to a certain degree. Noticeable? Maybe not. Maybe the game truly is growing and there is that much more talent. But again, there's a reason why 100 players right now at this very moment are on the cusp of the NHL. They're not in the league, but if there was expansion, they'd be in it. I'm also here to say that I don't want any more games per team per season. Like 82 is already enough. In fact, I think the NBA and NHL, well, Major League Baseball too, they ought to consider contracting the amount of games. It'll never happen based on the CBAs and how teams make money, but I definitely don't want them to get the idea of, oh, more teams, we need to have more games in the regular season against each other. And then my last general thought here before I get into the obvious candidates for NHL expansion cities is the fact that there's 2 underlying themes of every NHL market that's doing quite well. It's either, number 1, a really big market, and you've got enough hockey fans, people that have been exposed to the sport or are huge fans of it. You just have a certain amount and a certain threshold of people, or it's kind of a specialty market. Let's be honest. Most Canadian markets, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, those are more specialty markets. Toronto's kind of both, actually. It's a specialty market and the love for hockey is there. But, oh yeah, it's also one of the biggest cities in North America. So my point is you either have the cities that have a true desire and connection in their traditional hockey markets, and that's why they'll do well, or it's just a flat-out big city and the numbers are going to work mathematically. So without further delay, let's jump into all 6 different cities here, beginning with Salt Lake City, Utah, which in my opinion at this point is a front-runner. I'm not saying the front-runner, but they already have that Frozen Fury tournament, right? 4 teams come in the preseason. They've got the current arena, the Delta Center. It's old. It's been updated and upgraded. They say they can take an NHL team starting as soon as next season, if that were the case. They also, in the state of Utah, just passed $900 million to construct a brand new NBA and or NHL arena right downtown in Salt Lake City. So not only could they be ready for this like that, they also have the finances and the structure to build the future arena for a permanent home for an NHL team. They've also got the Smith Group, which are the owners of the Utah Jazz. They bought that from the Miller Group, who used to own the Jazz, and now they're on to developing other stuff, but don't think those two wouldn't collaborate, maybe even combine for an NHL effort here. So they've got the financing to go along with this. They also have a hockey climate. I mean, Salt Lake City kind of feels like Denver, kind of feels like, well, Calgary or Edmonton. It's cold, it snows, people can skate, they're exposed to hockey there, so it fits the geography too, right? Like if you just look on the map, where the Star is, there's no other team in the state. I guess your next closest teams would be Las Vegas, maybe Colorado, Seattle and San Jose are certain distances away. Arizona, I guess, is not that far too, but it's nice and spaced out, so you're not encroaching on anybody else's fan space or territory. And so I think Salt Lake City, for a lot of different reasons right there, is a front runner. Here's one that's kind of off the wall. And when Gary Bettman mentioned Cincinnati, Ohio in early February, was it at the All-Star game where he said this? I was like, oh, really? In Cincinnati, they have a dated arena. It's several decades old, multiple decades old. So it could probably support hockey like overnight, but man, that would be tough. Cincinnati, though, is a market that sees the need to have a more updated indoor venue. They've talked about replacing that current arena right next to the ballpark there in downtown Cincinnati and building something new that could host events and other sports potentially, not to mention NHL if they were to get it. Cincinnati is the 36th largest TV market in the continental United States. And so even though Las Vegas is like 40th, it can be done in these, I say lower markets, higher number markets, lower number markets. No, it goes the other way. My point is that it's not the biggest market TV-wise out there. I suppose it could be done, but I did some research. What are they saying in Cincinnati about the NHL right now? There's not a lot of buzz, not a lot of reality or conversation about this actually happening. Not to mention that in Cincinnati, you're not that far away from Chicago, from Detroit, and from, obviously, Columbus in a Blue Jackets game. So you are kind of stepping in the geography and territory of others here. And so I just, I think Cincinnati is a lot less likely. If we're talking about 6 different cities here, I would say that's either 5th or 6th out of 6. Houston, Texas, right? Obviously, the Arrows were a longtime AHL team there. Were there multiple iterations of the Arrows' existence? Well, now they don't exist anymore. They've never had an NHL team in Houston. They always had the Arrows, and now there's kind of a big gap in their absence. Tillman Fertitta owns the Houston Rockets of the NBA, so obviously he might want to be interested in being part of this. They've got the Toyota Center, so they've got an arena that's ready for this to go. Houston is a major market, unlike Cincinnati. Quite honestly, unlike Salt Lake City, there's a lot of people and a lot of television revenue and corporate sponsors that would exist in Houston. And there's also this. Dallas is not far away. And I said earlier that you don't want to step into somebody else's territory. Well, Dallas and Houston are big enough to survive on their own. Obviously, like it happens that way in Major League Baseball. You would almost be giving the Dallas Stars like the perfect built-in rivalry if you put a team in Houston. So I'm going to say of the 6, this one is definitely in the top half. Top 3 is where Houston sits for me. All right, here might be another 5 or 6 seed if we're doing it that way. Omaha, Nebraska. There are 0 professional, like top-tier major sports league teams in the state of Nebraska. And so it leaves you to wonder, well, why is that? Would the NHL be crazy for going in here and being the first? Again, not really, maybe. They did it in Las Vegas. They were the first pro major team to go into Las Vegas and be successful. Omaha has arena hopes. They talked about building an sports and entertainment complex out by, out by an outlet mall. I don't know how this would go. It's the 74th biggest TV market. So one of the smaller media markets in the country. There's no other team within a 200-mile radius. Now, I said earlier, you don't want to step in somebody's territory. And I said that Salt Lake City was kind of a nice geographical fit, just where it lands on the landscape. When there's nobody else within 200 miles of you, no other team, again, you kind of have to wonder. And I think Chicago would be the closest. Maybe the Blues would also be pretty close there. Or the Wild, would they be close? I'm trying to draw that line in my head, but maybe there's a reason why there's not any other team within 200 miles. Maybe this just isn't the market for the NHL. They have a USHL team, but a large part of the success, it's not even the fans. And by the way, I want everybody to know, if you're from Omaha or anywhere else, Cincinnati, that I'm mentioning in this video, and you feel disrespected, it's not the fans. You need great ownership. You need committed ownership. You need the league to really be in on this, but you also need corporations to be part of sponsorships. You need your team to pull a lot of weight here. It's really not about the fans. It's about everything else to make it right so that fans show up. Like, if a restaurant has to shut down, it's rarely ever the fault of the patrons. Like, oh, they just didn't show up. The food was so great. Well, maybe the service was bad. Maybe the location was terrible. Maybe the menu or the food was terrible, but it's never really the patron's fault, the restaurant goer's fault. So that's kind of what I'm saying here about these different markets. It's so little about the fans and so much about the different respective teams and what they could accomplish in those markets as a business. Kansas City, Missouri. All right, they've got the T-Mobile Center, which is right next door to where they want to build this new Royals ballpark, by the way. That's interesting. And if you look at the T-Mobile Center, it's not, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, not the same place. Similar name, but it's actually not occupied on any regular basis. There is no major pro sports team tenant. So it's a wide open building. It's not that old. Kansas City built that building for something just like this. And yeah, if it's next to the Royals Stadium eventually, how perfect would that be? They've been talking for 2 decades plus about bringing the NHL to Kansas City. It's just never happened. So it has been out there. Their mayor, I say the tweets here, their mayor of Kansas City, and also Patrick Mahomes a while back, were they trying to steal the Coyotes? They were trying to poach the Desert Dogs, the Yotes, and bring them out to Kansas City? Now, I don't know that I like that part of it, but I do like the interest level in Kansas City. One thing I don't think they have right now is a dedicated ownership group. I think it's the Hunt family who owns the Chiefs. They've kind of said, we're not necessarily interested in owning the hockey team. So what will present itself in that angle? Who knows? But that always helps, right? Having an arena that's already in place like they've got, but also having an ownership group that's ready to buy into this. It's also very necessary. But Kansas City, in terms of corporate sponsors, corporations, you largely need that to assure your market of success. So they've got a mixed bag of things going on here with Kansas City. I don't know. If I'm ranking this again, it's probably third or fourth, maybe. I probably should have put them exactly in order in my head before doing this video. And then there's Atlanta, Georgia. And this one is interesting, right? Because the NHL's already been there. As the Flames, as the Thrashers. Could the third time actually happen? And could the third time actually be a charm? Now, Atlanta has grown big time since the Thrashers left. Atlanta has changed. And there are corporations like UPS and Coke, and there's a Turner Broadcasting. There's a bunch of corporations in Atlanta that could be part of financing and supporting a team. There's also been a group request made by Anson Carter and people he's working with as part of an ownership group, and they'd really like to make this happen. They also have plans for building that complex called The Gathering. Is it in Forsyth? Am I saying that right? Forsyth? Is that a location, a city or a county? Wherever Forsyth is at, it's 45 miles away from downtown Atlanta, which, think about that for a second. This would be an Atlanta hockey team that's 45 minutes away from proper downtown Atlanta. But maybe this is the optimal location. Maybe this is where they do best. Maybe this is a reason why the Thrashers weren't doing so well before. So I think in reality that Atlanta probably is top 3. in likeliness of getting an expansion team out of the 6 I'm mentioning here. I don't know. There is just something about the third time of it that kind of makes you wonder what would really be behind making this decision and knowing that it would work this time versus hoping that it would work out finally. So there you go, 6 possible expansion cities. But like I said at the very start of this video, do you really want to do this? You just got to 32, and Seattle and Las Vegas, for different reasons, have done well, and you're kind of feeling like good about things. And now you want to jump into all this all over again and have odd numbers and weird situations. So I don't know. You made it here to the end of the video. You know I appreciate that. Thumbs up down below. That'll greatly help me and this channel. And by the way, if you're just seeing me and all of this for the very first time, that's awesome. I'm glad you found me. I really appreciate that. Do me a favor. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below so I can definitely see you back here next time.